Okay, let's talk about Scream. I haven't seen the original series before. I've only ever seen 5 and 6, and that's because I didn't grow up watching horror movies. But I love horror movies now, so I wanted to get into talking about Scream and why I love it. It is a dissection of the slasher flick genre, and I love dissections of movies, especially when it's a movie itself. It's very meta, and I love meta movies in that regard, probably because I'm very autistic, and it just kind of scratches that autistic brain, right? So what does Scream do? Well, it dissects all those old slasher flicks from the 80s, where not just like the main ones like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not just those, but also all those like B-movie ones that just kind of came out of nowhere, where someone would be the bad guy and kill like a sorority house, right? It would do that. Scream takes all those and goes, how do we make a parody on those that's also really smart? And it does it super well. So it starts off with that parody, right? Someone calls the house, the girl picks up the phone and goes, oh, who is it? And he's all like, want to play a game? And it's just like, oh, great, awesome, this is fantastic. This is a slasher flick. Everyone's like, yeah, this is going to be a slasher flick. Scream, right? It even has that stupid name, Scream, right? So it's like a synonymous, like, oh, you're going to scream. And he's got the boyfriend out there, and you're like, oh, yep, this is the type of movie I'm in for. And they kill the boyfriend, and you're like, oh, the girl's gonna escape, and then they kill the girl, and then the parents show up, and you're like, what's this all about? And then they all, the parents see the girl, and everything's dead, and it's super gruesome. Like, 1 is more gruesome than, I've seen 1 and 2 so far. Way more gruesome than 2. It's insane how gruesome they decided to make that for the first 2 deaths in this movie, in these movies. So you see that, and you're like, okay, what are we getting at here? Well, that whole scene, the first opening scene, was meant to be a parody on horror movies, on the slasher flick, where they randomly kill 2 people who have nothing to do with anything. That happens in a lot of slasher flicks, where like the killer just happens to come across people and kill them, just to show you that they're bad people. So they do it, just to do it, because it's done in other movies. And you might think, well, isn't that tropey? Yeah, but Scream is meant to be tropey because it's built on all those other tropes. But they do it so well. It's done so well. So then you end up in this interesting scenario where it goes and gets you get to Sydney, the main character of the Scream franchise, or at least of the first, I think 3, I don't know anything about 4. But she's the main character, and you learn about her backstory where her mom was brutally murdered by another guy, and you're like, okay, in a slasher flick movie, he would be the bad guy, right? This guy who murdered the mom is back for revenge to kill her, and he's on a killing spree, and this is like classic Michael Myers or Texas Chains, it's the classic killer, right? Oh, he's on the loose. And that's the thing. Most slasher flicks aren't mysteries. They just aren't. You're not trying to figure out who did it. You know who did it. And you're like, that's the guy who did it. Okay, cool. Good to know. Moving on. Right? But that's not this movie. Scream is a mystery. You're trying to solve who's the bad guy. And you got this group of friends. And so you're like, okay, well, it's obviously this guy because you've seen all these other slasher flicks, and you're like, it has to be him. And the father's gone, and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. He's back. He got out. You're going to learn later on in the movie that, like, oh, he broke out of prison, right? Well, that's not what happens, right? You learn that there's a lot of red herrings. A lot of red herrings. And that's great. Red herrings really, like a lot of red herrings is great in these types of movies. And they do it so well in this. Because when you have a red herring, or lots of them, and they're all tropes based off of other old slasher flick people who could be them, you're like, yeah, that's peak. That's exactly what you want, because you've seen these other slasher flick movies, and you're like, that's who it could be in the other movies. But this isn't the other movies. So who do they choose? The most common person that it could be. Her boyfriend. And his best friend. Because the most dangerous people in your life are the people closest to you. And it turns out they also killed their mom. And that twist, when you don't know it, is crazy. Because Billy Loomis gets freed. They're like, no, it's not Billy. And part of you's like, it has to be him, right? He's creepy, but sometimes people are just creepy. Okay. Right? You still have him, and then they pin it on the dad. Oh, that makes so much sense. It could totally be the dad, right? So you have all these pins and these back and forths. And then more deaths, and you still don't know who it is. But that's the thing. It's Billy and Stu. And that's what's crazy. Because until now, there was never two. Now, here's the cool thing about having two. The reason they had two villains is because of Scooby-Doo. Now, follow me through. Scooby-Doo came out before most of these slasher flicks came out. And in Scooby-Doo, there was always this joke where, Scooby and Shaggy would run away from these villains, and they would, bar up the door, and the villain would be behind them, right? Handing them another thing. It was a joke. Slasher flicks played with this, and they saw that, and they went, oh, let's just do that. You don't need an explanation. They're just a slasher, right? So, how did the guy get to them, right? Oh, they're running away. The guy's so slow. How did they catch up, right? How does that work? That makes no sense. They play off as, supernatural or, it just happened, right? This movie makes an explanation. How is he over there? There's two of them. You thought you escaped. There's a second one. How did you get away with stuff? There's a second one. You think you figured it out? Oh, someone called you. Oh, it can't be you then. They called me. There's a second one. There's always a second one. And that's so cool that they did that. It's so unique to Scream that if you have two killers in your movie, you're doing a Scream. You're now parodying Scream. Okay? So, it's such a great movie in that regard. And then in the end, having the trope of having Sydney lose her virginity so that she no longer is the virgin so that she can die is it's so stupid. Because that concept in movies where the virgin always lives is so stupid, but is so true. That is the truth in slasher flicks. That's how they play it off. The two that go off to, they have all these tropes that they follow. And this movie still follows those tropes. It has to follow those tropes. Because they're still in a slasher flick. So the idiots die. The people who go off alone die. The people who end up going off to have sex die. That's what happens. But it's also not just done in one small spot. It's a town. It's really interesting done. And it's so well written. And it's so much better than the second movie. But I'll talk about the second movie later. You guys let me know what you guys think about Scream. I loved it. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies at this point. So, peace.